I think Minnesota has a lot to prove. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it behind having a historic playoff defense.
You went to Clippers-Wolves, which could be an extremely good playoff matchup, and I think probably got more than you bargained for with that Wolves performance. If you were looking to be impressed with the team, I got to imagine you left Staples Center, now Crypto Center, pretty impressed with what you saw from Minnesota.
Incredibly impressed from Minnesota. I mean, if you're looking for a game that gives you a reason to believe in the Timberwolves as a legitimate finals contender, I think you would want to watch that Minnesota Clippers game last night. That third quarter, tremendous defensive performance by them to help build that lead. Obviously, offensively, they were very good as well, creating buckets. Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert at the basket on rolls to the rim. They did a great job offensively. But in the middle of that third quarter, I know it's gonna sound very expected coming from me, Chris, but as soon as Russell Westbrook came in the game, they had Rudy Gobert helping off him, staying in the paint. And then when Gobert was out, they had Cat doing it to end the third quarter. And I thought it really just screwed up that Clippers offense. They weren't getting any paint penetration at all. Their individual defenders were doing a tremendous job throughout the entire period, even before Russ got put in the game. Anthony Edwards, McDaniels, both against Kawhi Leonard, forcing multiple turnovers, creating hard shots for him, not letting them get to the rim. I thought overall that defensive performance by Minnesota, and they've always been a great third quarter team this season, really was a good example of what they could be come postseason time, relying on their defense as their foundation and then being good enough offensively with Anthony Edwards when he's on, Mike Conley creating some good shots, hitting threes off of screens. They showed some versatility on offense in addition to having their dominant defense in that third quarter.
Is it possible that Minnesota is just a uniquely bad matchup for the Clippers? We always see this when it comes to postseason time, that there are some teams that it's matchups, and they've got big wing defenders. They've got somebody that can guard the basket, and they've also you're not at a massive disadvantage in terms of the point guard. You don't have some explosive point guard that is going to put Mike Conley on his make him a detriment to you, or whoever they put out at their guard positions. That they, because of their size, because they're able to match the physicality, and because of the length that they have on the wings, that they just happen to be uniquely equipped to deal with what makes the Clippers great. And so that is a team that if I'm the Clippers, I kind of want to steer clear of, because there's not a lot of teams that are uniquely equipped to deal with that. But they just happen to be. Or am I overreacting and it's just one game?
I mean, it is just one game, but I do think you're right on when it comes to like projecting that matchup on paper, because Minnesota has great wing defenders. I mean, they have the best one, arguably, in McDaniels.
You know,
yes, and then size.
Most people, yes, like Kawhi and Paul, make teams look small. And
for sure.
Not them.
Yeah. And they got, a bunch of bigs. They're rolling out there with Gobert and Towns at the same time, or Naz Reid coming off the bench. So I think with Minnesota, they are a difficult matchup for the Clippers. I mean, it is just one game, but ultimately I came away highly impressed by the Timberwolves last night. And I mean, the Clippers in their own right are still, a great team. One of the teams that you can look at and say they, as is, are a finals contender. But that third quarter I thought was, pretty special for Minnesota last night if you're looking for a reason to believe in them as a finals contender.
Yeah, in terms of believing them as a finals contender, I think it's gotten to the point in the season where most of the rhetoric that you hear feels like people think that the Nuggets and the Clippers are on a collision course, that these are the teams that when you hear most people saying who they think can come out of the West, the Clippers have won a lot of people over in the past month and a half. And obviously, Denver is always going to be a pick to be there at the very end, as long as they have Jokic and they are the reigning champions. That being said, do you react in a way from watching that going, you know what? Minnesota should be in that mix too. Like we are people, they have been fantastic all season long.
No. No, I don't think so, Chris. No, I don't think Minnesota it belongs in that class yet. I mean, you look at the Clippers side of things, they have Kawhi Leonard, who's won championships and who is playing at I had him, we'll talk about the Bon Temps MVP poll later. I had him in my top 5 for MVP. I didn't see where he finished. I haven't looked yet. I want to be surprised when you say it on the pod later. I think they have James Harden, who's been to Game 7s in the Western Conference Finals against Juggernaut Warriors teams. They have Paul George, who is an all-NBA talent, and they have perhaps the best coach in all of basketball in Ty Lue with a great rotation as well. Minnesota, they have a lot of guys who have been in the postseason, largely Gobert and Conley. But Edwards, despite having some success in the postseason, he's still young. He still has a lot to prove. The Clippers have elite ISO scorers in Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. Minnesota has ants. After that, they don't have the depth of guys who can be used to just crush mismatches on their side when it comes to those end game situations. So I think Minnesota has a lot to prove. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it behind having a historic playoff defense. They're going to have to do it like the Pistons did 20 years ago, where they had an amazing defense anchored by Ben Wallace and Tayshaun Prince and Chauncey Billups at the point of attack and all those great Pistons teams in 2004. And their offense needs to be clutch, good enough. That's where Billups really made his name, right? Big shot Billups. That's where he did it, was in the postseason. So I think Edwards, Conley, they're going to have guys kind of, just be clutch in end game situations and show that they don't need to have that star ISO scorer behind Edwards, that they can be good enough offensively and dominant defensively to go all the way. But the Clippers have so much more proven on their side of things compared to Minnesota. I think a lot of Wolves fans would even agree with that.
Well, and the other thing is, as you've mentioned a couple different times in your game that you went to last night, they got their work done in the third quarter. So the fourth quarter became inconsequential. And that's where they have really struggled this year. Minnesota has had a rough go in fourth quarters. And we know when it gets playoff time, to your point about how it's like Edwards and then, all right, who else is going to get it done for me? We know how playoff games go, that the margins are so thin that these teams end up knowing each other so well, and that once you get to games 4, 5, 6, those games are going to come down to the last couple minutes of the game.
Yes. And so who can be Mr. Big Shot for Minnesota like Chauncey Billups became for Detroit in their finals run? So like who can be that for Minnesota? It might just be Ant. Ant might just reach an even higher level come postseason time. That's possible. Like this could be this could be the year of Anthony Edwards. That's what it could turn into, where he becomes that guy. But I guess we'll see who elevates their play in the postseason for Minnesota offensively, because they're going to need to have that, because their defense is going to be great. I have no doubts about their defense at all. People last night, I tweeted out how Gobert is the defensive player of the year favorite right now. I said it's amazing to see him reach an even higher level defensively now that he's surrounded by great perimeter defenders compared to Utah. And some people always respond, well, he's going to get played off the floor in the postseason. I just don't think that's fair at all. I think you're just not watching the Wolves right now if you feel that way, because it's so different with this team. They have more support. If Gobert does get pulled out to the perimeter, they can still have Cat inside. They can still have McDaniels as a help defender inside. They still have size. If offensively he is being helped off of or not respected, I think he's a better finisher at the basket now than he was in his Utah days. He had a finish against the Clippers on Monday where he received the ball around the free throw line, dribbled a couple times to get into for the paint for a finish. He can put the ball on the floor once if he needs to. Before, if he dribbled once, it was like going nowhere. He's gotten better at some of those finishes to punish smaller guys, whereas in past years he wasn't capable. So I think Gobert has improved in the ways that, and the roster's improved around him in the ways that I don't think he can get played off or neutralized in quite the same ways that he did with the Jazz. So I don't even worry about that with Minnesota at all. It's purely about, do they have enough firepower on offense with spot up shooting, reliable spot up shooting? Do they have enough ISO scoring? It's not even anything to do with Gobert, Cat. It's just about, really, I think, or Edwards for that matter. It's about everybody else.